Duke Theo was spoon-feeding Jane a strawberry cake, saying it matched the color of her eyes. He remembered that she always craved strawberries in the spring. Then he wrapped her up so she wouldn't catch a cold, and it was time for him to leave. He also reminded her, if she needed anything, just to ring the bell, and promised he'd be back soon. The girl begged him to listen to her and dashed after him, but the chain tied to her leg stopped her after just a couple of steps. She fell from the sudden pull, but kept pleading that she would never run away, just to let her out for a little while. But Theo refused to do so, and once again declared that she would never leave that room. Then he shut the door behind him. Jaina was desperate because he had promised to let her out if she did everything as he wished. However, Theo decided that she had to spend her entire life with him and that he would never let her go for anything. So Jaina spent the rest of her life in Theo's castle, trapped, considered a bad ending. But the girl reading this novel didn't think so. She herself would have loved to be locked in a luxurious room with a handsome hero who would love her and bring treats to her bed. She couldn't believe the finale of this novel was just around the corner and felt like even the creators didn't know what they were doing. Suddenly, her phone beeped, and she saw her interview results had come in. But it turned out she didn't make it. The girl realized that joking about the interviewer's tardiness at the interview itself was a bad move. With nothing else to do, she decided to go to the store to buy some food and noticed an ad for a game that was considered a masterpiece at the time. It was called How to Love an Obsessive Hero, and you play as Jaina, the wife of the great Duke Akaran. This duke, known as Theo, was the ruler of a lawless, demon-infested northern territory. He was a very ruthless man, yet famous, just like his lands, and one day he entered into a political marriage with Jaina. However, a warm breeze began to blow through his frozen heart after that. But if that was all there was to it, the game wouldn't be interesting. At first, the newlyweds' life seemed sweet and happy, but it started to fall apart due to Theo's excessive attachment. To win the game, players need to avoid Theo's obsession and achieve a happy ending for him. Many thought the ending of this game was terrible, but one fan actually liked how things turned out. She was so eager to be part of a story where the hero was obsessed with her, she even stuck to an ad on a window like she was hugging it. Eventually, she decided to head home, and suddenly, she heard a kitten meowing from across the street. Thinking the little cat was hungry, she decided to feed it and started calling it over. And the kitten obediently made its way towards her. Out of nowhere, a car appeared. And with the kitten in the middle of the road, she thought she could save it in time. She just wanted to do something, since lately everything had been going downhill, both the job interview and the game. And just as she grabbed the little bundle, she realized that her real life was heading towards a bad ending too. The girl screamed in fright and covered herself with her hand. But the next moment, she realized her hands felt different. She also realized she was still alive. But as she looked around, she noticed the place didn't look like a hospital. As she was trying to figure out where she was, a maid walked into the room and threw a dress at her. Then the maid started yelling that the lady still hadn't come down for lunch, since Count Altaya was waiting, and it was really getting on his nerves. The girl couldn't figure out which count they were talking about, but the servant, thinking she wasn't fully awake yet, reminded her that she was supposed to go to the Duke's house today. She did feel sleepy, but what seemed even weirder was the maid, who looked just like a minor character from a game. She also didn't get why the servant called her a lady, but then she walked over to the mirror and saw that her reflection had completely changed. She saw eyes sparkling like ruby diamonds and curly hair like a bouquet of peonies. The girl realized that somehow she had become the main character of the game, How to Love an Obsessive Hero. Somehow, she had transferred into the body of Jaina Black and couldn't believe it, always thinking this stuff only happened in mangas. But this actually pleased her, because first of all, she no longer had to worry about finding a job and earning a living. Now she could just enjoy a leisurely life with the handsome hero. She couldn't believe her wish had come true. Later, the girl decided to sum up what had happened. She remembered being hit by a car, and then she woke up in this game. She knew reincarnation in mangas was a common cliché, but she didn't care because she had become Jaina Black. Then the girl realized the story was just beginning, as she was still in the Black family mansion. But today was also the day she would marry Duke Theo, and she decided to pack her bags to leave as soon as possible. Jaina headed to the wardrobe, but all she noticed were mice rolling on casters, and she was a bit surprised to find she had no clothes. Then, the girl remembered that the heroine was poor because of her background, as she was the illegitimate daughter of Black. For this reason, even the maids and other servants treated her roughly, and her room was just a cramped, dusty attic. It saddened her that Jaina had such a life, but she was thrilled that today her life would turn in a completely different direction. She went down the stairs with a small suitcase, which looked very beautiful compared to the attic. Then the girl decided to peek into the living room to see if anyone was there, but she was just yelled at not to enter without permission. Still, she managed to spot a distinguished man and realized it was Jaina's father, but she knew better than to expect anything good from him. First off, the girl apologized and then explained that she came to say goodbye before leaving for Duke Theo's residence. But Madame Black got mad when she saw what condition Jaina was in to meet his grace. She pointed out that this act would tarnish the Black family's reputation, to which Jaina responded that she only wore what she was given. That's when her father yelled at her not to talk back to her mother, deciding to teach his daughter a lesson before she left. Erd raised his hand to strike her, but Jaina didn't even flinch, knowing the Duke definitely wouldn't approve. She even mentioned that no one would marry her with a bruised face, and her father lowered his hand, realizing he was powerless at that moment. Then a maid entered and brought a wedding gift in a box, which she immediately handed to Mrs. Black. She instantly saw that it was an elegant and beautiful fur coat. She had no doubt about the Duke's exquisite taste. Jaina remembered that according to the game script, the Countess would take away her gifted dress and send her to the ducal palace in a poor outfit. But the girl wanted to make sure His Grace fell in love with her at first sight, so she quickly snatched the gift from Madame Black's hands. Then she reminded herself that she needed to dress properly to maintain her family's reputation, so she took the dress. Afterwards, she asked to send her thanks to Count Altai and requested that next time she be addressed as the Duchess. Jaina traveled by carriage to the Duke, in a new world called Erlin, remembering that it had all sorts of settings. Erlin is a world with a variety of races, and the air is filled with mana for magic, and its population was diverse. But where there's magic, there are also monsters, and the northern part of the country, Tyronia, is especially known for its demonic inhabitants. This area was also called the Devil's Nest, but almost everyone feared and hated Tyronia not because of the monsters, but because of Theo. In the game's plot, Jaina was riding in the carriage to the duchy and cried because she was scared of him. But the girl who became her was different. She saw it as a fabulous opportunity to laze in bed all her life and be loved by a handsome hero. It was her personal utopia. Suddenly, the carriage shook and stopped, which almost threw the girl into the seat, and then she was told that she could get out. When she stepped outside, she noticed that the utopia she had dreamed of wasn't as fairy tale as she thought. Jaina even guessed that the coachman mixed up the destination, because this place looked more like Dracula's gloomy castle. But before she could finish her thought, her carriage took off in the opposite direction, leaving her all alone. The girl looked at the castle ahead again, which was downright creepy, and tried to calm the chills running down her spine. After all, she had nothing else to do, so she headed towards the gates, hoping that her future would be better than her past. Meanwhile, the Duke was up in the tower busy with his affairs, but he heard the sound of the carriage and then saw from the window as the girl approached. Jaina kept heading to the entrance, trying not to mind the bats, and still not understanding why this place was so eerie. However, she decided not to judge the castle by its cover, since inside was the love of her life, Duke Theo. Suddenly, a system window popped up asking whether to continue the game or not, and a wrong decision could cost her life. Jaina got scared that she might be killed, and now it didn't seem like a game at all. But there was no turning back. After all, her goal was to be locked up in a prison with the main character, so she decided to press the button to continue. Right then, with a piercing screech, the ancient gates opened, and as the girl stepped further in, she realized it wasn't as scary as in the game itself. It was more like a haunted castle, cobwebs everywhere, and the dust in the air made Jaina sneeze. She couldn't understand why no one cleaned up since it was a duke's castle, even though the guy was also a bastard. But still, he was a member of the royal family, yet he lived in such a place, and that's when the girl noticed they had something in common. The emperor had sent Theo, the illegitimate son of the late empress, to northern Tyronia as a form of exile, and the only reason for his marriage to Jaina was political. The emperor needed a way to control the aristocrats. Greedy Count Hans Black inherited a huge fortune from his ancestors, and for the emperor, he was supposed to be easy prey. But the count didn't mind, as he could count on the support of the royal family, so Jaina and Theo were sacrificed for the cause. It seemed strange to the girl that no one even met her, so she decided to immediately go look for the Duke. She also understood that if she had taken over another character, she would have had to play a fierce game. Then she spotted the peak of a tall tower and remembered that her future husband was supposed to be right there. It was the tallest tower, and she needed to get to the very top floor. But soon enough, Jaina made it to the right door. A window popped up again with options to knock, ask if anyone was there, or just open the door. She was actually glad to have the choice, fearing she might end up with a bad ending from one wrong move. She decided to press the button to open the door, but for some reason, the button wouldn't press. And that really pissed Jaina off. Then she thought about choosing another option, but suddenly felt her body start to move on its own. Next, her hand reached out for the door handle, and the next thing she knew, she stumbled into the office, tripping and sprawling on the floor. Rubbing her bruised forehead, she realized she just had to say the action, and it would happen on its own. Right then, the Duke approached her and asked what she was doing in his castle, looking even more sinister in the dim light of the room. But the girl wasn't scared at all. Instead, she was thrilled to finally meet Theo face to face. He had a mask on, but she didn't know it was him. Then she explained that the door opened by itself, and she was just standing there. The Duke just asked again who she was, and she retorted that it would be polite for him to introduce himself first. But then she realized that with such audacity, the ending could be not just imprisonment, but a plain death by his hand. Suddenly, the Duke didn't object and simply told her his name and title, and admitted that it was an honor to meet her. Then Jaina introduced herself and added that from today, she would be his wife. The Duke was a bit surprised. Apparently, he knew nothing about it, and the girl handed him an envelope from the imperial family. On the envelope, Theo saw the imperial seal, meaning the letter wasn't a forgery, and he grasped the situation. The girl was glad everything went smoothly, then clicked on a button in a system window that appeared, accepting the marriage. Meanwhile, Theo opened the envelope and declared that it just contained a blank piece of paper, but Jaina didn't catch his drift. He explained that it probably meant their marriage was empty, just like this sheet, and that visibly upset the girl. Theo did ask if the lady was okay with being informed about the marriage like that, but she didn't know what to answer. The Duke also mentioned that they both didn't want this situation, and that she could just leave if she wanted to. Then she admitted she had no home to return to, her parents treated her poorly, and she had no one else to turn to. Jaina started begging the Duke to let her stay, but he reminded her of the rumors that he was as ruthless as a monster. The girl believed those were just empty rumors. She was convinced that Theo was actually a very kind person. The Duke was puzzled, not understanding why she thought so, but decided to find her a room where she could rest. They walked down a gloomy corridor covered in cobwebs, and Jaina asked where all the servants had gone. Theo didn't answer, which was expected, since he had a very low favorability rating. It changes depending on the player's choices, and improving their relationship allows for many possibilities. The girl realized that since they had just met, the Duke's rating was about 0 right now. Suddenly, Theo stopped dead in his tracks, causing Jaina to bump her nose into his back, and he explained that they had arrived. In front of her, the girl saw a massive door, supposedly leading to paradise, where one could enjoy life forever. She wanted to thank the Duke for his kindness, but he was already heading back, seemingly completely ignoring her. Jaina decided that if she increased her affection, this man should treat her better eventually. Just before disappearing around the corner, Theo looked back at his new wife, who continued to say that he was a kind man. The Duke didn't understand why she thought so, but decided not to dwell on such pointless things, especially since he didn't trust her. As soon as the girl entered the room, she even flinched, for it was even worse than her attic. Moreover, there was no maid to tidy up, so Jaina decided she'd take care of the room herself. Shedding her fancy dress to avoid getting it dirty, the girl prepared to build her ideal life with her own hands. First, she opened a window to air out the room, and now she needed to work hard, as a comfortable and carefree life was at stake. Cleaning took longer than she expected, but Jaina didn't give up and skillfully handled the broom and mop. And when she threw out all the trash that had probably been accumulating for years, it turned out the room was even wider than it first appeared. Now all she had left to do was get her clothes out and arrange them, and for that, she spotted a pretty handy wardrobe in the corner of the room. But as soon as she opened it, a blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the castle from her room. It even scared the Duke, and he instantly appeared in her room, clueless about what had happened. The girl immediately rushed to him asking for help, and he got freaked out because she was only in a shirt. Still, he wanted to know what had twisted her face in horror, and she pointed out that there was a huge spider hanging in the wardrobe. The Duke didn't get why she was so bothered by this insect, but Jaina kept insisting it was big and looking at her weirdly. Theo still didn't understand why it was worth screaming about, and then he used his magic to wrap the spider in energy. Then the Duke chucked the spider out the window, noting that it was his house initially, and even shouted a few swear words. Theo then explained to his wife that everything was okay now, and she knelt down with a sigh of relief. That's when she remembered she'd seen a similar situation before, and that spider was supposed to kickstart her relationship with Theo. According to the plot she was aiming for, Jaina called the spider cute and even picked it up. When the Duke saw her warm feelings towards the spider, he brightened up, and their relationship began to develop. It was her perfect chance to increase her appeal to the Duke, but she missed it, and now she was mentally kicking herself. She felt so upset that she suddenly screamed and burst into tears, while Theo couldn't grasp what was going on with this crazy woman. Jaina realized that if she kept acting this way, her story would definitely end in death. Suddenly, she started feeling strange. It was hard to breathe, hard to open her eyes, and her stomach hurt. Then she noticed blood on her hand, and the Duke stood over her, asking her to keep quiet, insisting that everything was fine. Holding her bloodied body, he said that now they would be together forever. His face was smeared with her blood, and she felt her soul leaving her body. But then she heard the Duke calling her, explaining that she just zoned out weirdly, and the girl realized it was all just a hallucination. Jaina immediately apologized, assuring that it was all her fault and she would make sure it wouldn't happen again. She understood that her imagination had gotten the better of her, especially since she remembered that most endings of this game result in Jaina's death. Of course, one crucial moment was missed and done incorrectly, and now she needed to focus to avoid such mistakes in the future. Suddenly, the Duke took off his fur cloak and draped it over her shoulders, explaining that it's much colder in the north than in Black County. He asked her to wear the cloak for now, and he would find more warm clothes for her so she wouldn't catch a cold. The girl could hardly believe that the man who had been ignoring her before was now giving her his coat. Now she thought that her decision with the spider wasn't so bad after all, and she was actually glad it turned out this way. After a while, Theo brought her some clothes. They were old, but he couldn't find anything else suitable. As soon as Jaina touched the clothes, she felt their warmth and noticed how soft they were. Theo decided to wait outside while his wife changed, and soon she came out to thank him for the warm dress. The Duke was glad she liked it and even cracked a smile, his first since she had arrived at his castle. Then, His Grace promised to send servants the next day to clean her room. The girl asked why not today, but the Duke ignored her question again. She wondered why the servant scene was happening now, when it was supposed to be in the second half of the game. That's when Theo noticed there was no bedding on the bed, and Jaina admitted she had thrown it out. The guy didn't understand her action, but she explained it was too dirty, and that's when she found out there was no other bedding in the castle. She found it odd, considering he's a duke, and the whole residence had just one set of bedding. Theo decided to put that issue aside for now, and allowed his wife to spend the night in his room tonight. The girl was thrilled. She thought it was the perfect start to be right in the hero's room. When he led her in and opened the door, at first everything inside looked like a luxury suite. Jaina couldn't believe her eyes. Still, it was dark, and seemed as gloomy as her own room, making her wonder how long Theo had spent in this castle. Jaina realized that the darkness in the room made it feel gloomy, and decided to let in some beautiful moonlight. She opened the curtains, and immediately the room was flooded with bright light, making the Duke shield his eyes with his hand. But then his eyes adjusted, and he looked over at his wife's silhouette, who assured him that this was much better. Then he was about to leave, but the girl asked him to wait, as she wanted to talk with him a bit more. She knew she needed to win him over as soon as possible to get that coveted ending. At the same time, she realized she had nothing to talk about with the Duke yet, so she decided to start the conversation with the topic of bed linens. Jaina knew they would have to share a bed, but then Theo suddenly declared that a daughter of a noble aristocrat shouldn't speak so casually about such matters. She didn't get what the big deal was since they were officially married, but the Duke reminded her that he hadn't agreed to it himself yet. Jaina noticed how he blushed, and she found it so adorable, something she couldn't even imagine before. Just then, her stomach growled, and she remembered she hadn't eaten anything today because she was so busy. Theo also guiltily remembered that he forgot to feed her and started rummaging through the dresser drawers. She didn't understand why they couldn't just head to the kitchen, but then he pulled out something wrapped in a couple of pills. That was her balanced dinner, also packed with nutrients, even though the portion looked really small. Jaina saw her husband as an amazing person again, yet she still couldn't understand how she could be satisfied with this. She was expecting luxurious aristocratic dishes, fresh grilled steak, and a 3-tier dessert. And suddenly, she really wanted to go home. But in real life, she also had no money, had to starve for days, and just get by on noodles alone. She didn't want to go through that again, now that she was supposed to enjoy luxurious and delicious food. But in the end, all she got was a nutrition bar. And what baffled her more was that these bars even existed in this era. Jaina knew she had to calm down first, since there had to be a way out, and she asked where the dining hall was. The Duke explained that it was on the first floor, and she immediately decided to head there, dragging her husband along. She had to overcome this challenge at all costs and achieve a blissful life. However, the dining hall wasn't at all what she had imagined when she arrived. It looked more like a storage room, and a mouse had hanged itself on the shelves. There wasn't a crumb of food, and the girl felt utterly hopeless. She had wanted to cook a tasty steak, but her sadness turned into fresh horror when another spider crawled out towards her. Out of fear, Jaina started reciting the Lord's Prayer, while the Duke stared at her bewildered, not understanding the meaning of the words. The girl asked him to ignore it, but she still couldn't believe that there wasn't a single crumb of bread in the whole castle. Then she remembered the bars and decided to fill her stomach with them today. And for that, she went back to the room. On the way back, she was quiet, which was surprising to Theo. Plus, he was sure she didn't like those bars. The Duke offered to take one of the bars if she didn't like it, but the girl declined and just thanked him. He realized that she was so hungry, she even agreed to that, and then saw how she eagerly devoured the food from the package. Jaina knew one bar wouldn't be enough to fill her up and thought about asking for more. From her facial expression, Theo could tell she didn't like the taste, and she didn't argue, guessing he probably didn't like it either. Suddenly, the Duke stood up to find some decent tasty food for his wife, but she found it odd that he was doing this in the middle of the night. She assumed Theo was planning to hunt monsters, and he admitted he'd gladly do it if she asked. Jaina asked him to stop, saying she didn't like the situation and confessed she was worried about him. The girl understood that he lived all alone, his place was a mess, and he had no way to eat properly. That could make anyone sick. But she also asked him not to worry, because from that moment on, they'd be together. Jaina suggested they live a wonderful life together, and also asked her husband to take care of himself. She wasn't sure if she had pronounced the main character's lines correctly, but hoped she remembered them well. Suddenly, the Duke realized, and then declared that he didn't understand why, but felt he needed to apologize to her. Theo admitted that he had made false assumptions about her before, and that's why he acted the way he did. Jaina realized that as soon as she entered the game, she didn't understand anything, but now she saw that he was ruthless because of prejudices. Actually, Theo values others' feelings, and he's a very attentive person. She even regretted not noticing his good qualities earlier. Now, Jaina knows that Theo is a good guy, and asked him to stop apologizing to her, promising that they would get through this together. The Duke agreed, and then asked what he needed to do to make his wife feel better. She found it so sweet that he was concerned about her that she almost melted and nearly cried from happiness. Right then, an idea came to her, and she asked her husband to show her what was hidden beneath his mask. The Duke got instantly anxious, unsure if the girl was ready to see his face, but she was already reaching to rip off his mask. Theo grew up in the slums, shunned by people, and forced to survive on his own. Everyone considered him a monster. Many shopkeepers even banned him from approaching their stores. Everyone around pointed at him, calling him ugly and dirty. Many got goosebumps just by looking his way, thinking he was a disgusting guy. Once, he had to starve for 3 whole days, knowing if it continued like this, he would simply die. Suddenly, he heard a gentleman sharing food with another hungry guy, asking him not to rush to avoid choking. Theo moved closer, hoping to get a piece too, but that gentleman shooed him away. The kid was called a monster child with creepy eyes that just sent shivers down your spine. Then those people also left. But Theo wasn't to blame for being born that way, and starving, he fell and prepared to die. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a normal bed. Even thought he was just dreaming about the old times. Then a servant came in and reported that the emperor was waiting for him, but couldn't say why because he didn't know. But even in the imperial castle, filled with power and intrigue, Theo was utterly alone. He went to His Majesty and asked why he wanted to see him. The emperor confessed that he felt cold just from looking at the boy and knew that Theo was called a monster. He then explained that he summoned the boy because the situation in the Northern Territory had worsened and monsters were rampaging near the border. His Majesty suggested that the prince should go there, and he eagerly agreed, despite having no military experience. The guy understood the real purpose, since even his own family wished him dead, after which he started to believe that he was a monster. However, he didn't understand what he had done or why he was born with such eyes, thinking his entire existence was just a mistake. But even after they took him to the northern part of Theronia, his father continued to keep an eye on him. The emperor feared that the royal blood in Theo could become a threat to him, so he arranged a political marriage. His Majesty used the guy for his own purposes, and the Duke had no clue why Jane Black was really sent to him. Theo thought she'd try to kill him once he let his guard down, so he decided right off the bat not to trust her. But this girl turned out to be totally different, and he was amazed by the way she spoke and even swore. Theo didn't expect her to start cleaning the room in just a shirt, and he found it odd that she didn't believe the rumors and asked him to take care of himself. The Duke looked at her face and felt that her smile was genuine and friendly, not forced. She was really warm to him, while others called him a monster, and now he wanted to protect that smile. However, the Duke got really scared that everything would fall apart when his wife asked to see what was under his mask. Jane noticed how nervous he got and realized she had pushed too far. But Theo assured her she hadn't done anything wrong. He was just afraid that once she saw his eyes, she would treat him like everyone else. The Duke didn't want that, as it would be unbearable after all the warmth he had felt. Jaina reached for his face again, assuring him that she didn't care what he looked like under the mask. She was really curious to see his true face, so Theo took off the mask himself, deciding to trust her for once. Jaina was shocked, but not from horror. This guy just seemed 100 times cooler than in the game. She couldn't understand why this beautiful face was considered horrible. She even fell to her knees and started praising God for bringing her here. The Duke didn't get what was going on with his wife, who then asked him to be quiet, explaining that she was praying. Then she told the Duke that he was actually very handsome, which made him blush, as it was the first time anyone had called him that. Jaina admitted that it was also the first time she had ever said such things to a guy, but assured Theo that he deserved it. She noticed her husband was still embarrassed and started apologizing in case her actions had hurt him. The Duke explained that everything was fine. It's just that his heart started beating even stronger, and it was a strange new feeling for him. Jaina cupped his face with her hands and declared that she would never get tired of looking at him, and he even got all mushy from the excitement. But suddenly, the girl got flustered herself and started apologizing. Then she walked over to the window while the Duke reached for his mask. Jaina saw this and couldn't understand why he was about to put it on again, and that's when the Duke confessed that he wears it because his eyes are cursed. But his wife objected and proudly declared that he has very beautiful eyes, and there's absolutely no need to be ashamed of them. She guessed that with his eyes, he could crush monsters. People were scared of him for that, and that's why they called him a monster too. Jaina couldn't believe that the people of this world couldn't see the beauty in the combination of black hair and silver eyes. She started thinking about how to convince her husband not to wear the mask again, and then the choice window popped up again. Then she thought she needed to say something comforting. Plus, he was so beautiful that she didn't want to lie to him. And then she just asked who the idiot was spreading such nonsense about his eyes, and those words weren't in the choice options. Theo looked at her in shock, and the girl decided to repeat her question, but he immediately covered her mouth with his hand. He asked her to refrain from using such harsh words unless absolutely necessary, but Jaina wouldn't agree because somehow others were allowed to insult him, even though they knew nothing about him. Besides, she saw nothing wrong in calling people names when they weren't even around. Suddenly, the Duke laughed, but Jaina didn't get what was so funny about what she said, and Theo admitted he was having a great time with her. She knew he appreciated hearing kind words at the start of their relationship and was glad he laughed. Then she asked her husband to call her by her name, not Miss Black, since they were going to spend the rest of their lives together. After that, she snatched the mask from his hands and asked him to say goodbye to it and never wear it again. She explained that she was the only one in the castle who saw his face, and then decided to take a shower before bed. Left alone, the Duke felt strangely, experiencing an indescribable relief after his wife's words. Now he didn't even care that she sometimes used those harsh words. She was still a very interesting girl. Then it hit him that she was about to take a shower in his bathroom, and he was also anxious because today was their first day as a married couple. While thinking that nothing would come of it since it was just a political marriage, he was curious about what Jaina thought. The guy realized he had been daydreaming too much about this girl and started mentally scolding himself, especially since he had only met her today. Still, she was stunningly beautiful, with mesmerizing pink eyes, like rubies crafted by the finest artisan. Her hair flowed like silk ribbons, and she had very delicate facial features. The Duke felt an urge to kiss her right then, but caught himself daydreaming about her again. Theo buried his face in the pillow, trying to calm down, knowing he needed to remain a gentleman no matter what. Then out came Gina in his robe, which was several sizes too big for her, and she asked if there was anything smaller. Seeing his wife like that, the Duke froze on the spot and lost his ability to speak, feeling a rush of hot sweat. And then she even reminded him that tonight was their first wedding night and suggested they enjoy this bliss. She started describing how unforgettable this time would be, while the Duke felt so awkward he almost wanted to hang himself. But then his imagination kicked in again, and it was his wife's voice that snapped him back to reality, noticing he was frozen in place. Theo didn't know how to explain his behavior to her, and to avoid an awkward conversation, he decided to head to the shower himself. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the bathroom, and the girl couldn't figure out what had happened while she was away. In the bathroom, the Duke splashed cold water on his face, realizing he shouldn't be thinking about his wife like that. To cool off quicker, he fully submerged himself in the cold water, hoping that the day would go by without any incidents. He thought that Jaina was incompatible with a monster like him, a thought he dwelled on for quite a while. When he came out, he saw that the girl had already fallen asleep, surrounded by candy wrappers. Even in her sleep, she was muttering about a whole cake, and Theo just confirmed that she was indeed a very strange person. After all, in just one day, she managed to make him, always cautious, trust her, and being with her was a lot of fun. Suddenly, the Duke realized that tonight, for the first time in a very long time, he was going to sleep peacefully and have good dreams. The next morning kicked off with Jaina suddenly screaming that she was late. She jumped out of bed the moment she saw the sun was already up. But then she looked around, remembered with relief that she was dead and didn't need to go to work anymore. She flopped back onto the bed, realizing she couldn't remember how she passed out last night, and felt a bit embarrassed. She remembered that her character is an aristocrat, so even in her dreams she looks like an angel, and knew she was more like a factory worker in comparison. Jaina started worrying that she might have blurted something out to her husband in her sleep. Then she got curious about where he had gone off to. Scrambling around the bed, she saw him sleeping on the floor and figured she must have pushed him off in her sleep. She decided to drag him back onto the bed before he woke up, pulling at his body, which seemed surprisingly heavy. It even seemed strange because the Duke looked so skinny, and that's when she noticed he was starting to wake up. She immediately said hello, but Theo instinctively lunged at her and pinned her hands down. It seemed like a monster woke up inside him at that moment, and Jaina started pleading with him to stop and come to his senses. The guy realized he had snapped at his wife and immediately backed off, not knowing how to hide his embarrassment. He also noticed that bruises appeared on her arms right away and started apologizing, explaining that it wasn't intentional. The girl assured him everything was okay, and then she remembered that the Duke had always been sensitive, even in his sleep. It made sense, considering he grew up in the slums, and even at the imperial court, Theo was often a hair's breadth from death. The guy started apologizing again, calling himself a monster, not even listening as his wife tried to calm him down. He didn't want to hurt her, and then asked if they could pretend like nothing happened between them. At that moment, a system window popped up with a divorce option, but Jaina didn't understand why, since their marriage was already confirmed. Meanwhile, Theo kept insisting he was a monster and didn't deserve to be the husband of such a beauty as her. The girl started explaining that it was all her fault for startling and waking him up so abruptly. She assured him she wasn't mad at all and still trusted him completely. They just didn't know each other very well yet. Then Jaina suggested fixing things to the point where they could complement each other, for the sake of their marriage. Theo wasn't opposed, but he insisted that he was to blame for that incident, and he couldn't believe that Jaina was giving him a chance to make amends. The girl confirmed that everything should be fine, and suggested they start by going out together into the city. The Duke suddenly feared that, under this pretext, the girl simply wanted to leave the castle, and his face turned pale in an instant. However, he asked what she wanted to do in the city, and she suggested they grab some tasty food and buy some clothes. She also planned to tidy up her husband's hairstyle a bit, as she thought it a sin to hide such a cute face under his hair. The guy still wondered why they had to go today, since the servants would only arrive tomorrow. Jaina realized she'd be starving by tomorrow and started pleading with her husband, making cute puppy eyes. Theo agreed and said that he would find someone to accompany her in the city, but Jaina wanted to go with him specifically. In the game, the favorability rating usually increases over 30 days, and the girl couldn't wait for that moment. She wanted to keep fighting for their relationship and was even ready to survive on just snack bars to do so. To convince her husband to go with her, she suggested he pick a handsome guy to accompany them, hoping it would make him jealous enough to join. It worked, and the Duke declared he wouldn't do such a thing. Jaina remembered he also had a strong sense of attachment. Suddenly, he thought she was just meeting another man, but quickly corrected himself so as not to upset his wife. Theo explained that as a husband, he simply couldn't allow his wife to stroll around town alone with another man. Realizing he still didn't want to go, Jaina said she might as well take a walk by herself, hoping it wouldn't be too scary. Then the Duke declared he would go with her, but he had two conditions. First, he would wear a mask and a cloak. Secondly, as soon as they were done, they would head straight back to the castle, and the girl agreed, eager to get going. Soon, the girl was thrilled to have the chance to see the city from the game with her own eyes. Eventually, hunger made itself known, and Jaina urged her husband to head to a little restaurant first, hoping there would be free tables. But as soon as they walked in, the waitress almost dropped her tray in shock and immediately yelled that they were closed for the day. The door girl quickly slammed the door right in their faces, which pissed off Jaina, and she promised to deal with that girl later. They were still hungry, so the Duke suggested checking out another store, and that's when they started hearing whispers from the people around them. Everyone recognized Theo as the Great Duke, but they couldn't understand with fear what he needed in the city. People noticed the girl with him and started whispering that he had just kidnapped her, and it literally made their hair stand on end. Jaina couldn't understand why the hell they were criticizing instead of minding their own business, and decided to set things straight. She wanted to explain everything to these idiots, but the Duke begged her not to, and just leave. The girl didn't argue, realizing that Theo was having a tough time, and then they visited a few more places. However, the reaction from the owners was the same everywhere, and the young Duchess couldn't understand why they were saying such terrible things. She felt sorry for her husband, because he had lived like this all his life, and others always treated him badly, and she hadn't even cared before. Theo apologized to his wife, realizing he really shouldn't have gone with her, and decided to wait for her outside the city while she grabbed a bite and did some shopping. Suddenly, Jaina realized the story was unfolding nothing like the game, and she had to do something about it fast. She agreed, but first asked to stop by another store, and if they couldn't get something to eat there, they'd head home together. She was scared that with things going this way, they could forget about dating in the city. And now, all they had left was the old snack bar. Right at the entrance, Jaina made it clear they needed to eat and asked if there were any free tables. The woman behind the counter confirmed they could go in, but then her expression changed, and she suddenly left. Jaina began to despair, realizing this wasn't going to work out either, and they'd probably have to give up. The woman ran outside, approached her husband, who was sweeping the yard, and explained that the Great Duke had arrived. Then they both came back and started to greet Theo, promising to give them the full service. The Duke was silently amazed, while Jaina was actually happy that they could finally fill their stomachs properly. The owners of this shop seemed genuine, smiling as they invited customers to take a seat. Satisfied that these were good people, the girl took a seat, but Theo seemed in no rush to join her. She told him not to worry, noticing that they were the only ones in the restaurant, and Theo sat down next to her. Soon, the woman returned, explaining that she had prepared a delicious dinner and asked them to call if they needed anything else. Jaina was surprised because they hadn't even ordered yet, but the table was already quite generously set. The woman explained that this was nothing compared to the kindness the Duke had shown them. Jaina was even more surprised, and the hostess reminded her that her husband once got lost in the forest, encountered a dangerous monster, and nearly died. But then the Great Duke appeared and saved the man from the beast, and now they wanted to show their gratitude. The lady confessed that she had put her heart into this meal, hoping the dear guests would enjoy it, and asked them to eat heartily. Theo's expression finally cleared up, and Jaina was sure he liked being treated well. She even reminded him that he could eat in peace since there was no one else around, and the owners weren't afraid of him. Still, the guy couldn't relax, because if people found out he was here, rumors would spread that this shop was cursed. He was worried that after such rumors, not a single customer would come here anymore, and these kind folks would suffer. But he was hungry, and Theo suggested they eat quickly, though he felt it might be better to grab the food and get out of there right now. The Duke kept apologizing, explaining that it was all his fault because he was a terrible monster. Jaina understood that her husband's heart had suffered many unbearable wounds, and she couldn't grasp how hard it was for him. However, Theo was also a human with his own emotions and feelings, and she realized she had to protect him somehow. The girl gently took his hand and promised that she would always stay by his side with her beloved and only husband. At the same time, she knew that if what happened today kept happening in the future, the prejudices wouldn't disappear quickly. Jaina started promising the Duke that he wouldn't have to suffer like before, because she would stay by his side no matter what. The guy was so shocked he even dropped his jaw. It felt so good to hear those words, and he almost thought he was imagining things. But Jaina kept on saying that he wasn't alone anymore. She really wanted to protect him with all her heart. Theo felt a lot better after that speech, and even the shop owners noticed that they looked good together. After eating their fill, Jaina thanked the hosts, who were glad to have them, and asked them to come again. Then the girl suggested going back to the castle, but the Duke reminded her that she wanted to buy some more dresses. She didn't want to dig deeper into her husband's wounds, so she explained that it could wait for another time. Suddenly, the owner admitted that her daughter ran a clothing store nearby and offered to take them there. The daughter was also very kind to the great Duke and his wife, and started showing Jaina lots of dresses. The Duchess was even lost for choice, since she liked everything, and the owner suggested she try them on right away. Jaina absolutely loved the first dress, so much so that she wanted to try on more and more. Just a typical girl out shopping. Theo was sitting in the corner on a small sofa, calmly waiting for his wife to enjoy picking out clothes. She was also thrilled that for the first time in her life, she could buy anything she wanted without worrying about money. On the way back, Theo admitted he had heard rumors that Count Black was quite wealthy. The girl modestly explained that money had been tight, realizing she had almost given herself away. Deciding to change the subject, Jaina started praising the store for its beautiful clothes and charming owner. Jaina confessed that if the store were closer to the castle, she could visit it almost every day. When they got home, she felt so tired that she just flopped down on the bed like a sack. And while the Duke went to take a shower, she was happy that she could enjoy her meal today, and that this was the life she had always dreamed of. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise. Theo was in the shower. The servants wouldn't be back until tomorrow, and she couldn't figure out what it was. Jaina got scared like a little kid and immediately wrapped herself up in the blanket, shivering as she kept an eye on the front door. The sound was definitely coming from there. The Duke was still in the shower, and with a shaky voice, Jaina asked who was there. No answer came, and for a moment, it even felt like it was some kind of ghost, making the girl even more terrified. But she gathered her courage and approached the door, trying not to wet herself from fear and to find out what it was. The sound suddenly repeated, almost sending Jaina's heart into her boots, and she wanted to quickly go back. Probably a ghost for sure, but the girl didn't remember such scenes in the game, so she stayed by the door. She knew it was a romantic game, and there definitely shouldn't be any ghosts. She had never encountered them in the game before. Holding back a lump in her throat, with trembling fingers, she reached for the door handle, needing to figure everything out. And then, there stood some man in front of her, whose face in the dim light and weak moonbeam seemed translucent. This man asked Jaina how she was doing, and this scared her so much that she just slammed the door shut and ran away. She rushed to the bathroom door and started pounding on it, calling her husband to come out and help her quickly. Theo popped out again, totally freaked out, not getting what freaked his wife out this time. She threw herself at him, screaming that there was a ghost outside the door, and in her terror, tried to hide under his robe. The Duke pleaded with her to calm down and give him more details, while he could hear her heart pounding. Jaina could hear his heartbeat too, and she was also distracted by his broad shoulders, wide as the ocean, and his massive muscles. Seeing him like that, she even started purring, while Theo kept asking why she was screaming like she was being sliced alive. At that moment, the man who had been outside the door was now in the room and addressed Miss Jaina. Fear engulfed the girl again. She instantly hid behind the Duke's back, baffled about how the ghost knew her name. Theo figured it out and asked his wife to calm down, explaining that it was their butler, Homer. The man immediately apologized for scaring the lady and confessed that he still couldn't believe what he had been told. Homer also thought he had heard a woman ghost's voice in the bedroom, which is why he hadn't let himself in. Then the butler hurried out, apologizing for the interruption, but the Duke asked him to wait. Theo explained to Homer that he got it all wrong and said some phrase that Jaina just couldn't grasp. The Duke told his wife that it was a servant who apparently arrived early, and she realized she messed up by mistaking Homer for a ghost. But she was really scared after all, and she couldn't understand how the real Jaina kept her composure in such situations. Theo noticed his wife was very frightened, but hoped she could now calm down, and, to comfort her, even patted her on the head. For the girl, this was something new. She even thought that somehow their relationship had moved to a new level. Then she noticed the Duke's abs showing, and she immediately wrapped his robe tighter, not to lose her mind with happiness. And then she finally admitted that she felt something very strong for him and couldn't keep it inside any longer. Theo realized she felt the same way he did, but Jaina suddenly composed herself, knowing she had to deal with it for now. After all, she wanted a desired ending, and for that, she needed to endure at least until the story's end. Suddenly, the Duke apologized for touching her without permission, referring to when he was stroking her head. But Jaina didn't see anything wrong with it. It was even innocent. And instead, it got all her thoughts jumbled. She explained to her husband that he shouldn't worry, since they're a couple, and touching is normal in their situation. Theo explained that she just went silent after that, so he thought she got mad. But his wife assured him that she was very happy. Jaina clarified that he's her husband, and she would never get mad at him for physical contact. The Duke was even pleased, then asked her permission to hug her, and she agreed with great joy. It was their first embrace as a married couple, and both felt incredible happiness at that moment. The Duke felt a very soothing warmth from her skin, then admitted that he too wanted to get to know her better. Just then, Homer's voice was heard, and the Duke even fell to the floor in fright, while Jaina didn't know where to hide. But then Theo pulled himself together and asked what was going on, and the servant reported that there was an urgent matter. The guy went off to talk to the butler, and Jaina was actually a bit mad because they were about to kiss just moments before. But on the other hand, she realized it was still too early for a kiss scene, even though they were officially newlyweds. When he returned to the room, the Duke started getting ready, explaining to his wife that he really had urgent matters and had to leave for a while. With a hint of sarcasm, Jaina remarked that it was fine, since even married couples have nights when they don't sleep together. The guy knew he had spoiled her mood and promised to return as soon as possible, but she just buried her face in the pillow. Theo was stuck in place, realizing how much he had upset her, and suddenly, Jaina turned around and said it was okay, and he could go wherever he needed. The Duke leaned down and with a thankful peck on her forehead, headed for the exit. And Jaina kept her hand on the kiss spot on her forehead for a while longer, hardly believing her husband had done that. She felt so instantly happy that she even wanted to cry, realizing that her dream was starting to come true. It seemed like madness that the obsessed main character turned out to be so sweet and charming. The girl's heart was pounding so wildly from that, she probably won't be able to sleep until morning. Theo headed to the study with the butler, where he needed to sign some documents. But all the while, his thoughts were occupied with his wife, making it hard for him to concentrate. Then, Homer handed him a document about the investigation into Jaina, but explained that many details still needed to be clarified. However, he could confidently say that there were no connections between her and the imperial family, so she wasn't a spy sent by the palace. The butler speculated that the Black family might somehow be involved, but Miss Jaina could be trusted. Theo felt down again. He couldn't be completely sure that he could fully trust this girl, as it could be dangerous. He also couldn't judge her based solely on his current feelings. He mustn't forget that she could betray him at any moment. Jaina eventually fell asleep and dreamt of so much food that she couldn't fit any more treats in. She woke up when a maid entered the room with good morning wishes, addressing her as Madam. The maid introduced herself as Aniclimax and said that starting today, she'd be Jaina's personal maid. The girl was thrilled that her life as a real aristocrat was finally starting and asked Ellie to let her sleep a bit more. But Ellie explained that they needed to start the day's schedule at 6 in the morning. Jaina was surprised that she had to get up so early, since usually only students start getting ready for school at that time. It's also the time when office workers rush to catch the subway or bus. Jaina couldn't understand why she had to wake up so early now that she was a great duchess. Ellie began listing the morning routine. First a walk, then a shower, and changing into everyday clothes. Then breakfast with the Duke, after which the day's activities could begin. Jaina realized they were planning to take away her freedom, but she just silently burrowed back under the covers and turned away. Ellie even got worried, thinking her lady was feeling unwell, but Jaina just grumbled that she wanted to sleep in a bit longer. The maid promised to come later, but the Duchess decided to play it safe and locked the door. Now she could dive back into her dreamland, especially since her bed was so comfy, she could sleep in it forever. The girl was thrilled that she could now stay with the Duke forever, and even imagined their wedding ceremony. She felt so happy knowing everyone was blessing them, and she was thanking people in return. Suddenly, during this imagined ceremony, she saw a door on the floor in front of her, not understanding how it got there. Then she saw the Duke's worried face, asking her what had happened. The girl realized it wasn't just a dream. Jaina saw that the bedroom door was actually lying on the floor, with Theo crying next to it. Turns out the Duke came for breakfast, but his wife was still missing, and the maid admitted she was still resting. Ellie also mentioned that the lady asked her to come later and seemed to be feeling unwell. This worried the Duke, and he immediately went to check on his wife, but no matter how much he knocked, she wouldn't open the door. Theo called out to her, but got no response, and he started freaking out, thinking something bad had happened. He even thought a killer might have sneaked into the bedroom, but at that time, his wife was still snoring away peacefully. The Duke had no choice but to kick the door down, and then he saw Jaina lying motionless, which scared him even more. But the noise from the door falling and his rummaging woke her up, and she tried to figure out what was going on. Still groggy, she thought it was all just a dream, and decided to keep sleeping to enjoy that wonderful dream a bit longer. But Theo wasn't giving up. He figured she had a fever and grabbed her hand, and that's when she realized this wasn't a dream. Theo asked her to stay quiet, thinking she was out of strength, and he immediately went to call a doctor for her. Then Jaina noticed Homer, who explained that breakfast had been arranged for her, but she never showed up. He also mentioned that they had been knocking on the door for a long time, but she didn't answer, so they had to take necessary actions. The girl remembered just how obsessed the main character was with his wife, but she asked him not to worry. She reminded him that they walked a lot yesterday, and she was really tired, so she wanted to sleep in a bit longer than usual. Theo felt relieved that she wasn't sick, and the Duchess asked him not to worry and promised to come down to the dining room soon. When the Duke and the butler left, Jaina found out from the maid that it was already 9 in the morning, and then she offered to help her get dressed. The girl definitely didn't expect this, thinking that as a duchess she could sleep as much as she wanted and live freely. However, when she came down, she couldn't believe her eyes that they finally had decent food. Theo explained that Homer prepared everything since the chef hadn't arrived yet, but she was still surprised because they didn't even have any groceries. The butler modestly explained that he's not a great cook, but he tried really hard and hoped that his cooking would be to Madame's liking. When the girl tried the dish, she found it very tasty. The steak was very juicy and buttery. Jaina knew that aristocrats eat stuff like this every day, but she could never get tired of such delicious food. She would eat this no matter whether it was cooked by a killer assassin or a deadly ghost. After breakfast, the girl went back to the bedroom, so full that even her stomach felt happy. She didn't care much about having to wake up so early anymore, but decided to talk it over with Theo to get woken up later. Later, Homer took her to the office and pointed to a huge stack of books that Jaina needed to read. The butler took it upon himself to first teach her about the history of Akarana and the etiquette of its society. Then she'll learn how to manage this castle as its mistress, including organizing balls and parties. Jaina also needs to learn how to properly communicate in different situations, and that's when she realized she was starting to hate this world. She thought duchesses had to go to ball parties every day, and she even planned out her future life. The girl didn't understand why she had to study again, since she had already finished school and didn't want to read anything. Another day, Homer again handed her a stack of books to be read in one day, but she couldn't see how that was even possible. The butler explained that the Duke himself used to study 3 times as many books a day, as he had been exceptionally teachable since childhood. And while he was praising the master's skills, the girl couldn't see how that would help her in this situation. Suddenly, Jaina thought of sneaking out quietly and asking Theo for help, but the butler seemed to be watching her every move. She explained that she wanted to read in her room, but Homer said it was being cleaned right now. She started making up all sorts of excuses, like a schoolgirl trying to skip class, but nothing worked. Then Homer confessed that the Duke had personally set the dates when Jaina was to be educated. Next, the butler declared that she had an exam tomorrow on what she learned today, and the girl realized she had misjudged Homer. At first, she thought he was a ghost, but now she was more than sure that this man was a real devil. She used to think she had everything for a good life, but ultimately, nothing in this world comes for free. She still needed to prepare for this exam, even though she had already become a Grand Duchess. Realizing the exam was only tomorrow, she decided to take a quick nap and climbed into her cozy bed. But as soon as she got comfortable, Ellie walked in and Jaina started grumbling that you should knock before entering. The maid apologized and explained that she wanted to knock, but there was no door, and she just asked Homer for permission. The Duchess realized she had completely forgotten about the missing door, but then it hit her that Homer had been standing outside the whole time. Ellie clarified that he was busy with paperwork while also waiting for the lady's orders so he could quickly show up. But Jaina was sure he wasn't really waiting for her commands, but rather making sure she read all the books and studied. She quietly crept to the doorway and peeked outside, but the butler wasn't there. She thought he had left, but then she heard his voice behind her, ghost-like, which scared the bejesus out of her. Jaina even fell on her butt from fright, not understanding how he managed to sneak into her room unnoticed. Homer, on his part, didn't get why the lady was so surprised, as if she'd seen something horrific. Then, he got curious about why she wasn't in her own room, and she explained that she wanted to call him for something, but she was so tired that she even forgot what she wanted to ask him, and Homer offered to walk her to her room. The girl couldn't figure out what kind of person he was. He was raising her like a real strict mom. Jaina agreed to go back to the room, but she still couldn't pull herself together to hit the books. She knew that if she kept this up, things would end badly, so she decided to use some skills from her truancy playbook. Jaina started explaining that she needed to do something, but Homer suggested delegating it to the maid. The girl began to think of a plausible excuse that only she could handle and no one else. Then she declared that she planned to go to town, but the butler said that the Duke hadn't mentioned anything about it. Jaina explained that her husband needed a haircut because she was worried that his long hair was obstructing his view. That's when she noticed that Homer had even longer hair and suggested they go together, but he flatly refused. However, he allowed her to go to his grace and ask his opinion on the matter, and Jaina was thrilled that she managed to get her way. Bursting with joy, the Duchess practically flew to her husband's office, but when she entered, he was surprised to see her. He became curious about what had happened, since she was supposed to spend the whole day studying books with Homer. But the girl was also quite surprised as soon as she entered, because she didn't expect to see her husband wearing glasses, even calling him a cute nerd. However, she quickly corrected herself, saying the glasses really suited him and added a certain seriousness to his face. The Duke blushed a bit, but thanked his wife, and she melted again at his reaction. Then, Jaina suggested they go to town today, but he declined and asked her to go continue her studies with Homer. The girl explained that she was asking not for herself, but for her husband, and stepping closer, she adjusted his fringe that hung over his forehead. Theo declared that he wasn't planning to get a haircut because he didn't want anyone else touching him. He also didn't want anyone seeing his face. And in any case, he wasn't planning to go anywhere today. Jaina pondered that she initially just wanted to skip her studies, but now she really wanted to see her husband with short hair. She knew there had to be another reason he didn't want to get a haircut and started recalling the game's plot. Theo had been facing countless threats since childhood, knowing that someone could come and take his life at any moment. Maybe that's why he's so wary of sharp objects like scissors or kitchen knives. Still, the Duchess thought he'd look much better with short hair and began to think of a way to pull it off. Then, a system window popped up with choices that hadn't been there before, but all the options seemed hopeless to her. Jaina knew Theo had psychological trauma, so a super gentle approach was needed right now. Suddenly, she got an idea and suggested she could cut his hair herself, but he still didn't think it was a good idea. When the Duke was little, his teacher was very strict with him, using his pointer for discipline. He threatened that if the boy made one more mistake, he would slap him across the face again. The teacher was so angry and couldn't understand why this monster hadn't been thrown out of the royal palace yet. Theo was shaking, but he finished the job. When he turned to show his teacher, he saw him swinging scissors at him. He was yelling that this country didn't need terrible people like Theo, and he was about to stab him in the neck. The boy dodged, and the man only managed to cut his hand, but promised to end his suffering. The caretaker thought the kid himself wanted to be rid of this curse and find peace, and he prepared to strike again. In little Theo's eyes, deep horror was reflected. He realized that even his teacher hated him enough to want to kill him. After that, the Duke couldn't stand the sight of shiny scissor blades or the metallic sound that made his hair stand on end. However, Jane managed to convince her husband, and now she was planning to really work on his hairstyle. Theo still asked her to take her time, but she promised to give him a haircut that would probably be just perfect. At that hint of doubt, the Duke became wary, but Jane asked him not to worry, and that she would do her best. Theo guessed that his wife had never cut hair before, but agreed to close his eyes and let her handle the rest. For her, this was a chance to personally enhance her dear husband's looks, and she hoped everything would go smoothly. Now, all she had to figure out was what to do and how to do it, since the only thing she'd ever cut before was her own bangs. Jaina started, and the sound of the scissors seemed unbearable to the Duke. On top of that, he couldn't forget that she might be an imperial spy. He even thought that right at that moment, she was swinging to end him, and he opened his eyes. But what he saw was his wife's face, diligently working on a patch of his hair, trying to be as careful as possible. The Duke closed his eyes again, reassuring himself that this girl would never betray him, and he couldn't let her see him looking pathetic. Jaina noticed how he trembled and gripped the armrest tightly, realizing that his psychological trauma definitely came from the scissors. She decided to cheer him up and shared that once, when she was cutting her own bangs, she made a terrible mistake. But the saddest part was that it was irreversible, and she had to wear a cap to hide her blunder from everyone. And ironically, just when she saw someone she knew, the wind blew her hat right off her head. The girl was super embarrassed because everyone was laughing at her, and she just wanted to disappear right then. But that's all in the past now. Theo couldn't figure out who dared to upset the future Duchess, and asked her to let him know if she sees them again. The Duke promised to make sure those scoundrels completely forget their bold words and never act like that again. It pissed him off, but Jaina was glad he stopped shaking, though she hoped he didn't have any psychological scars left. But anyway, she'd keep helping her beloved, especially now that she realized cutting hair wasn't that hard. Looking at Theo, Jaina realized she had overestimated her abilities, but still, she managed to give him a new haircut herself. It just seemed to her that it turned out way too short, because she tried to even it out, and kept removing layer after layer. And now her handsome hero looked more like a freshly enlisted soldier with a shaved head. Jaina figured it was because she only had one pair of scissors, and having tools from her world would have really helped in this situation. Theo ran his hand over his head and noted that it was shorter than he expected, while Jaina quietly started backing away. She didn't want to face his wrath and started claiming that he looked way cooler this way. Then, without waiting for his thanks, she bolted out of his office, hoping he wouldn't be too mad. But she knew deep down that his unique charm was now gone. The girl saw Theo glance at himself in the mirror. Remembering how she had asked him to trust her, she knelt down, begging him to listen to her first. But the Duke didn't need excuses and drew his sword. Now, there was only one way she could earn his trust: by giving up her life. No matter how much Jaina pleaded with him to talk, Theo wouldn't even listen, and the next moment, blood was spilled. At that moment, she screamed and realized she had dozed off over her books, and the stress had given her a nightmare. She didn't know why she started having such dreams, and guessed that maybe her character had some sort of foresight. In her panic, she couldn't figure out why she had run to Theo's room, but then remembered she was actually supposed to be cleaning. Now she had to figure out how to calm her husband down, since she couldn't admit she gave him that haircut on purpose. But since she couldn't come up with anything suitable, she had to accept that their relationship was about to go downhill. Just then, her husband knocked and asked to come in, but she didn't let him, because she hadn't even written her will yet. Jaina was sure he was still mad, but thought it'd be better to start the conversation herself in this situation. She already saw him reaching out his hand to end it all with her, and then it would be over. The girl started praying to a deity to fulfill her dying wish to be born into a wealthy family next time. But Theo suddenly just touched her head and explained that he was worried because she had run out of the office abruptly for no reason. Jaina carefully asked how he liked the haircut, and he admitted that he really liked it. But what he liked even more was that his wife had cut his hair, which made him blush again, and her heart beat faster. The Duke also confessed that thanks to her, for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the sound of scissors and asked her to always cut his hair. To Janie, it sounded like a marriage proposal, and she admitted it would be an honor for her. She also promised to train hard to improve her hairstyling skills with each attempt. A few days later, the Duchess noticed that her husband's hair had grown long again, thanks to a certain potion. Homer brought the potion, and the Duke no longer looked like a clean-shaven soldier. while Janie was relieved that everything turned out fine. At breakfast, Theo asked how her studies were going, and she claimed she was making some progress. She just felt too embarrassed to admit to her husband that she was a complete novice at studying, despite trying to remember something. The problem was they gave her too many books at once, and her brain couldn't handle all that information at the same time. Homer gave her a ton of assignments in the morning and promised to come in the evening to check her knowledge. Sometimes she just got angry, thinking it was too much, since she's not a computer to absorb so much all at once. Janie had put up with so many books for too long, and now she wasn't sure if she was living a normal life correctly. She wakes up at 7 in the morning, takes a walk in the garden, then it's tea time with Theo, and the rest of the day she's studying. She's got the body of a young and strong woman, but her soul is wearing down more and more each time. It no longer felt like the life of a great duchess. Jaina was like a lab rat in some inhumane mission. She hated this monotony. Nothing ever changes. Plus, it's hard and boring. But then she thought, there's no reason she can't just run away from here, and she was even ready to do it. Meanwhile, she didn't forget that Homer was lurking by the door eavesdropping, and Ellie and Theo were probably in cahoots with him. Then she noticed the curtains and decided to make a rope out of them to escape through the window. Soon, her rope was ready, and she threw the ends outside, preparing to live a freer life. The Duchess's descent started off pretty well, and she was thrilled with her brilliant idea that would help her escape. But as she was descending past the second floor, a maid saw her in the window, and Jaina realized she was busted, and now she was really in trouble. Ellie just asked what the lady was doing by the window, and got worried, because hanging out there is super dangerous. Right then, a strong wind blew and swept the Duchess away like a feather, ready to carry her off into the distance. The girl tried to hold on, but her fingers weren't strong enough, and the rope slipped from her hands. Jaina realized she was doomed either way, but this kind of ending seemed pretty silly to her. Still, luck was on her side, and the Duchess landed in some bushes, relieved to still be alive. And as she was climbing out, she heard Ellie screaming at the top of her lungs that the lady had fallen out of the window. Jaina knew things were bad, and she didn't even have time to catch her breath before she started running as fast as she could. She ran non-stop for quite a while, until she ended up in the forest, and when she finally stopped, she even started feeling nauseous. But then Jaina realized she was doing something wrong, as none of the story branches had this kind of development. A game heroine definitely wouldn't act like this, and now it might cost her the relationships she had built. Lately, she noticed Theo growing on her, which kinda made her sad, so she just sat down under a tree, feeling down. But Jaina didn't blame herself for it. Actually, it'd be weird if she hadn't run off after all that. She didn't get why she needed to learn all these manners, like walking properly, or even how to drink water. To her, it was all nonsense. She thought there were tons of other, more interesting things that were way more useful to learn. That's when she realized she was lost. But this was the central part of the forest where Theo's castle was. Plus, this area was known as the most dangerous in the whole north, and the castle itself was protected by magical barriers. Only now did Jaina realize that this place was crawling with dangerous creatures, whose only goal was human life. Monsters were hiding everywhere, behind every corner, and the forest was swarming with them. And now, Jaina was lost in this dark, dangerous forest. Suddenly, she heard some rustling in the bushes, and at first thought it was a monster, but she didn't even have a sword with her. Then she remembered that in the game, there were bears in the forest, and she also found some stick that was supposedly magical. The girl placed the branch in front of her and screamed that if anyone touched it, the ruthless Duke would leave no one unskinned. And something peeped from the bushes, which didn't sound like a cry from a hungry monster. So Jaina gathered the courage to check it out. But then she thought maybe it was a monster luring her in, so she stepped back to where she was before. Yet, the next squeak made her think she couldn't leave a creature with such a tiny voice in trouble, so she went over anyway. There sat a little kitty, meowing pitifully, and Jaina remembered seeing a very similar one before her death. She looked closer. It wasn't quite a kitty, but still, she couldn't figure out what such a little one was doing there all alone. She sat down and smiled at it. But suddenly, the kitty started growling, showing sharp fangs, yet Jaina wasn't scared. The Duchess decided the creature was just scared itself, and started calling it, assuring it that she meant no harm. The kitty calmed down, came closer, first sniffed her hand, and then licked it with its soft, gentle tongue. But after that, the Duchess felt a strange dark energy enveloping that very hand, yet she had no idea what it was. In this world, there are two ways to use magic, most people use mana floating in the air. But there are mages who use the mana directly from their bodies. Theo is one of them. He's got powerful magic, and for his skills, he earned the title of Swordmaster, a title not many receive. Jaina, on the other hand, doesn't have magical powers, so Theo protects her. But he wasn't there at that moment. The girl felt the dark energy increasingly tightening around her hand, while that little monster cat seemed to be playing with her. But then it all stopped, and the creature started cuddling up to the Duchess, making it seem even cuter to her. Now she realized that this creature had chosen her as its owner in this way, and she wasn't against having such a cutie. Still, Jaina knew that no matter how cute it was, it remained a monster, and she should probably keep her distance. She can't bring home such a creature, even though some people keep tigers and lions as pets. Now Jaina decided, even if it's a monster, it can be well trained, and it will become her sweet little child. The monster cat nodded at her as if he agreed, and then the Duchess suggested they look for the way home together. Meanwhile, the Duke was in his office when Maid Ellie entered with an urgent report. With a slightly trembling voice, she admitted to her master that Mrs. Jaina had fallen from the 3rd floor. This really shook Theo, and he immediately asked where she was now. But Ellie only guessed that she might be somewhere in the forest. The Duke ordered the maid to lead him immediately to the last place his wife was seen, completely ignoring the butler. The maid took him to the bushes where the Duchess had fallen, but she wasn't there, and they realized that Mrs. had gotten lost in the castle's borderlands. Theo declared that they must search for her in the forest, but first they needed to inform Homer, as he knows what to do. Ellie ran off to carry out the task, while Theo headed into the forest, calling out his wife's name, hoping she would respond. He had been searching for a long time, but couldn't find her. He even started to think that monsters might have attacked her. Yet hope didn't leave the Duke, and he continued calling for Jaina, not understanding why she had run away without saying a word. The fact that she left him scared Theo even more than if monsters had devoured her, because he thought they'd always be together. He couldn't figure out what he did wrong, but even so, he wasn't about to let her go since he couldn't live without her anymore. Meanwhile, Jaina reached the Duke's castle and realized that her character's settings must always bring her back to this place. She showed the castle to her pet and explained that this would now be his new home, hoping he would like it. But then she noticed the little monster had fallen asleep, so she decided to quietly take him to a room and put him to bed. There, she set up a separate pillow for him, and now the question was how to explain all this to Theo. Jaina didn't know if the Duke would allow her to keep such a pet in the castle, and just then she heard someone calling her from the street, seeing her at the window. The Duchess looked out to them, not understanding why everyone had gathered, while Theo asked her to stay put, saying he'd come up to her. His look was so fierce that Jaina panicked, not knowing what to do, realizing he was mad about her escape. And the girl also feared for the little creature, who could get caught in the wrath of the furious Duke. Jaina grabbed the kid and hid him under the bed, telling him to stay put until she could get him when things calmed down. As soon as she hid him, the Duke entered the room and told his wife they needed to have a serious talk. The girl felt her heart sink, while Theo started demanding what she was even thinking. She begged him to calm down, but he couldn't. He was too worked up and restless. Theo couldn't understand why she left the castle without saying a word. He even thought she might hate him. Then the Duke declared that from that moment on, she could never leave the castle, hoping she understood every word. Just then, the butler came in and asked his lordship to calm down, noting that he had scared the daylights out of his wife. Theo suddenly snapped out of it and immediately apologized, explaining that he got really nervous and seemed to be cooling down. But then the little monster peeped, and everyone in the room noticed, while Jaina worried it had peeped at the wrong time. The Duke realized his wife was hiding someone, but she started pleading with him not to go there and promised to explain everything. But Theo felt something dangerous was there, and went back to the hiding spot under the bed. The girl prayed silently that her pet wouldn't peek out, but just to spite her, it slid across the floor from its hiding place. Jaina got even more anxious and wanted to pick him up, but the Duke intercepted the little monster and demanded explanations. He considered it dangerous, but his wife disagreed, snatched the pet away, and pleaded for it to be left alone. The Duchess explained that she had spent some time with this creature, and it hadn't harmed her at all during that period. But the Duke wasn't convinced. He still thought it was dangerous, even though it was just a little one. Jaina started promising to teach it how to live with people, assuring that the little one wouldn't harm anyone. Theo again started explaining that when this monster grows up, it probably won't listen to anyone, and controlling it would be impossible. The Duke asked his wife to look at the situation soberly, but she knew in her mind that her husband was right. Yet even so, she didn't know what Theo would do with her boy and refused to give him up. Jaina reminded that now she's a prisoner, and even though she's the boss, she still can't do anything as she pleases. She can't even sleep as much as she wants, and they keep making her study. Her daily schedule is just hellish. And now, she can't even keep a pet, which she clung to even tighter and started crying. The Duchess now feels like Theo treats her like a real prisoner, not as his wife. The Duke argued that it wasn't true, but he kept insisting that it's not just any animal, because it might attack her at any moment. Jaina didn't feel like talking to Theo anymore, and she asked to be left alone. He didn't argue with his wife any further, and left the room, while the butler asked him what he was going to do with the little creature. But he was thinking about how it was the first time Jaina had raised her voice at him, even though before this, she always seemed cheerful, even when things were really tough. The Duke asked Homer to prepare the carriage, explaining that he wanted to buy something special for his wife, and started getting ready for the trip. At that time, Jaina was worried that instead of calming her husband down, she had only made him angrier. Then she looked at the fluffy little one and realized that it was all worth it for such a cutie. She apologized to the little creature for scaring it and picked it up. It hugged her back with its tiny paws and snuggled close. It was as fluffy as cotton candy, and after a moment's thought, Jaina decided to name it Watame. Yet she knew her husband was right. No matter how adorable it was, you just can't raise a monster in a castle. She felt sorry for her husband because he was worried about her, and she had messed up so badly that she wanted to apologize. Jaina also knew that she probably couldn't keep her promise to live together with Watami, but at least for today, she would keep him by her side. The Duke had already reached the town after a while, and when a familiar merchant spotted him, Theo asked him not to make a fuss. He just wanted to make some purchases, and the vendor led him to the goods, explaining that they could also take orders if something was not available. But Theo immediately chose a rather hefty chain and explained that it would be quite enough for him. The day dragged on forever. The Duchess spent all her time in her room, trying to figure out where her husband had gone. When her maid came in, she also had no clue where His Grace, the Duke, had headed off to. He hadn't told even the butler, and Jaina understood how things were likely to unfold from now on, as everything seemed to fall into place. She realized that the Duke would either divorce her or torment her till the end of her days. But either way, she had to wait for him. The lady waited for her husband until late in the evening and was now beginning to understand what it meant to worry about someone. She wondered if Theo felt the same, especially since he was told that she had fallen out of a window before disappearing. Then she asked Watame to not be afraid when the Duke returned, but to greet him joyfully instead. Later, Jaina saw from the window that her husband's carriage had arrived, and she immediately ran to meet him, a small animal in her arms, but she froze in place because the Duke looked menacing, and he was holding a chain, which led her to some terrifying guesses. Jaina started by asking him to talk first, but Theo reminded her that she hadn't wanted to talk to him recently. The girl started apologizing to him, but Theo didn't understand why she was saying sorry, and then she got totally confused. That's when her husband explained that it was actually him who should be apologizing for not understanding her feelings. Then he showed her a chain and reassured her there was nothing to worry about anymore. At that moment, Jaina remembered how she had wanted the Duke to lock her up, but felt she wasn't quite ready for something like that. Theo continued, saying it might be a bit uncomfortable at first, but she'd get used to it over time. And then he reached out his hand to her. The girl really wanted to ask him to stop, but she was too scared to even open her mouth and just closed her eyes. She braced herself to be chained, but then saw that the collar and chain were actually meant for Watame. Meanwhile, the Duke was carefully looking at the unhappy little face of the creature and thought that the collar was too small. Then he handed the other end of the chain to his wife and explained that this collar was specially for monsters, which weakens their powers. It was also the most effective collar he had managed to find in all the stores in the city. Then Theo apologized for leaving without explaining, but he just needed some time to cool off. She used to think he left because he didn't want to see her, but now she was so happy she almost fainted. She was afraid that Theo wanted to get rid of her, and now she apologized for yelling at him without understanding his feelings. Now she realized that instead of getting rid of the pet, the Duke had gone to buy it a collar so she could keep it. Jaina thought her husband was totally disappointed in her, but he hugged her and explained that could never happen. She also hugged him tighter, because that's when her true feelings for Theo started to show. After a while, the Duchess calmed down but looked very swollen from all the crying. She started explaining again how scared she was that the Duke might never want to see her again. Her husband understood her and admitted he was also to blame, and he realized that anyone in that situation might want to run away. Then he told her that if she really hated studying, she didn't have to do it at all, and she could sleep as much as she wanted. The only thing he asked from his wife was that she didn't hate him, but she hadn't even thought about that. Theo then remembered again how she didn't want to talk, but guess he just doesn't know the tricks of modern married life. Jaina explained that she can't hate someone who loves her so deeply, and he liked those words so much that he asked her to repeat them. She agreed and stroked his face, and the Duke melted so much that he couldn't help but kiss his wife. Jaina herself realized that she had fallen head over heels for him without even knowing it, and now she can't imagine life without him. The next day, the Duke decided to talk to his wife about the little monster because he wanted to ask for 3 conditions. The collar must never be removed, and if she wants to go for a walk, she must always have someone accompany her. And the third and most important condition was that the Duchess should never jump out of the window again. Jaina didn't quite understand how the last point related to Watami, but she agreed and asked him not to worry about it. A few days later, the Duchess went for a walk with the little monster, but since the chain was heavy, she replaced it with a rope. During this, Jaina noticed that Ellie has been looking very cheerful lately and asked what had happened. She explained that the castle's reconstruction was complete, and now elegance could be felt everywhere. Plus, there was an increase in staff. The Grand Duke's castle seemed to have been reborn, and the servants knew it was all thanks to Lady Jane. She herself was delighted that by using knowledge from her past life and resources, she managed to turn the castle into a real beauty. Now all she had to do was wait out her prison sentence and enjoy a leisurely life. Moving to the next hall, the girl met the butler, who asked which book she preferred today. She wanted the one she was reading a few days ago and headed to the study to read in peace. She was also happy that Homer had stopped making her study, and she enjoyed the freedom she was given. For several days in a row, she just lazed in bed, but then she got bored because she didn't have a smartphone. So, she decided to read, since some books turned out to be interesting for her after all. At first, Homer even thought she was planning to go back to studying for the exam, which gave her the chills. But the Duchess was just reading something because it was interesting, yet she still felt like the Grand Duchess she was. One day, Jane had a visit from Ellie, who reported that there was a visitor for the lady, which surprised her since she wasn't expecting anyone. In the living room, she met Lady Angie, who greeted her and explained that she would be in charge of her outfits. The maid explained that His Highness had secretly arranged this to surprise his wife. Then they started bringing in clothes, and the Duchess was pleasantly surprised by the variety and beautiful designs. Now Jane could choose anything she wanted right at home, and if she didn't like something, it could be replaced right away. Suddenly, the Duchess had a strange feeling that she had seen all these outfits before and realized they were from that very store. Then she remembered that this was the same Lady Angie who managed that little shop, and she was pleased that the lady recognized her. The lady explained that after their meeting, the Duke came to her and hired her to take care of his wife's clothing. Now, Angie couldn't help but tear up remembering how emotional the Duchess was at that moment. Jaina decided to discuss the matter with her husband, and, after handing over the maid duties to Watami, went to find him in the garden. The Duke was training there almost every day with his sword, and he could even chop down a tree in one fell swoop. Theo noticed Jaina peeking at him from behind a tree and became curious about what brought her there. She explained that she just lost track of him for a bit, though in reality, she was admiring his movements. Then she asked why he chose Madame Angélie specifically to handle her wardrobe. Theo simply remembered how his wife had once wished that if that store were closer, she would visit it every day. Jaina clarified that she had just blurted that out casually, and he went and bought the whole store for her, as it was a big decision. The Duke then explained that it's necessary to buy the best clothes, as it's an important status symbol for aristocratic ladies. But his wife was just trying to tell him not to take everything she says so seriously. For a moment, she even jokingly wondered what he would do if she wanted to become an empress. And Theo paused to think. He imagined what Jaina would look like then, and explained that it would only take him a little time. The girl realized her husband was also joking about it, but for some reason, he blushed, and she figured it's best not to joke with him too often.